Sam, thank you for being at the Clinton School at the Clinton Center.
Pleasure.
When you started playing Lincoln over 20 years ago, I read an article that you said you were selected because you were tall and thin.
And ugly.
And ugly. And how did you get involved with playing Lincoln? How did that happen?
Well, I heard they were doing Gore Vidal's Lincoln for television, and I wanted to do it very badly. And I didn't really have I couldn't have given you a reason then why, except that it seemed like it would be a great part to play. I didn't have any particular image of him as a man. I just knew he was a great president, and it was a great story. But then over time, you know, he's a gigantic magnet, and over time, you just get sucked in, and pretty soon you can't get enough.
How did you really study Lincoln once you got this part?
Anyway, I was in Washington, and I had an afternoon free, and I went to the Library of Congress, and I was standing around in the card file room looking lost, and a nice woman came over and said, "You look lost. Can I help you?" And I said, I was just wondering if you had anything here about Lincoln. And she said, "We are the Lincoln Library." And I said, "Oh, good," because I have an afternoon, and I thought I'd learn some stuff. And she said, "May I ask you why you're interested?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be playing him on television." And she said, "Oh, dear." And then she gathered half a dozen people from around the library, and they tried to tell me everything there was to know in an afternoon. And it was just unbelievably helpful that there was this library there, and that there were those resources there, and that she and the people that were with her were able to put things in my hands, like the letter that had been written to him by the actor who had an apology for having released to the public something that Lincoln had written him, saying that the Scottish play, that Shakespeare's Macbeth was his favorite Shakespearean play, and it had gotten a lot of insulting comment in the newspapers, and then Lincoln wrote back saying, "It's perfectly okay. I've had a lot of things said about me, and I've really gotten away pretty easy." I'm not quoting him exactly. It was a beautiful thing they said. Anyway, we spent the whole afternoon. I saw a life mask of his face. I held a cast of his hand in my hand. I held these letters in my hands, and they brought me photographs, and they showed me all this stuff. And then late in the afternoon, I said, "Well, it's about time for me to go. I got to catch a train." And one of these men said, "Wait just a minute. Do you have just 5 more minutes?" And we went down and down and down and down, and all the way into the basement of the library. We went down a long corridor, down another long corridor, all the way to the back of the building. We went into this room that was empty with a lot of work tables with work lights over them, and only one of them was lit up in the way back of the room. And the man I was with said, "Have you closed it up yet?" And the guy working at the table said, "No, but I'm about to." He said, wait, I got a guy I want to show this. And he said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "I don't know if we're supposed to do this." And my guy said, "No, it's all right, it's on me." And we went all the way to the back, and he took this bunch of stuff, and he went, "Here." And he held out, I put it in my hands. It was the contents of Lincoln's pockets on the night he was assassinated, and it was like a jolt. And it's the kind of jolt that a library, a presidential library, only a presidential library can give you, I think.
Did you make replicas of those and put them in your own pockets?
No, I did not make replicas. The other thing that library did for me was that it has a voice archive. And we've been walking around this library, and being able to hear the true sounds of all the people is just absolutely invaluable. Of course, there are no recordings of Lincoln, but the library had archives, and the archivist was able to say, of all these voices, if I had to make a bet, I'd say this guy or this guy or this guy.
On Lincoln Seen and Heard, when you speak the words of Lincoln, a lot of people talk about his Gettysburg Address, and they talk about his second inaugural address. But it's Cooper's Union speech that he gave, which doesn't quite, which isn't as well known to the general public as the other two, it sort of propelled him really to the nomination, to the election. Can you talk about that speech?
Harold Holzer and I, we've known each other for a very long time all around Lincoln. And we'd already done quite a number of things. And Harold's book was about to come out, and in connection with it, he thought that it would be interesting to read excerpts from the Cooper Union speech. And I didn't want to read excerpts, and I thought a way to get out of it, maybe even, was to say that I would do the whole thing or nothing at all. And he said, "Oh, no, you can't do the whole thing. People won't sit still for that." And so we kind of dared each other into it. And then with his other skills as a public relations person, he arranged for there to be quite a mob. And we read it at Cooper Union. And the thing that I think was you have to ask him, but I think it was a surprise to him, certainly was a surprise to me, is that the speech is funny. And of course it's about something very, very serious. But the structure of the speech is such that the irony, it's sort of structured the same way that Mark Antony's speech in Julius Caesar is structured, so that there's a repeated phrase that keeps coming back, and first you take it straight, and then you take it funny, and then you take it seriously, and then it makes you mad, and that same pattern was in the Cooper Union speech, and it still played.
And I hope we get to hear some of that tonight.
Yeah, you'll hear a piece.
Good. The in doing this with Lincoln, hadn't you played Jefferson before as well? Didn't you portray Jefferson in a couple occasions?
I think I played Lincoln first.
And what have you learned about Lincoln that you perhaps didn't know? And then a follow-up question: how do you think Lincoln, based on, again, there's no recordings of his voice, but how would he fare in today's environment?
Well, in one sense, of course, it wouldn't work at all, because he wouldn't have the skill set for today, because the skill set was all different then. But given his adaptability to the circumstances then, and given his enormous intelligence, but principally, I think, given the fact that he knew how to say what he meant, and he meant what he said, he would have a real good chance today, I think. Plus, he had a sense of humor and all that stuff. He'd probably do real well on talk shows and nighttime television and stuff. A lot of the image of Lincoln is this sort of tough Civil War leader who had to make tough decisions, and then, as you said, he did have some humor. But when you read the letters, which you saw, I'm sure, when you were in the Lincoln Library at the Library of Congress, that he wrote to the families of those killed in the war, mm-hmm. showed a real sensitive side to this person. Mm-hmm. But was he as complex as he appears to be? Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's really surprising that a person in history would be a multifaceted person, because you are and I am, human beings are anyway. I think the thing that's surprising about him is the integrity, is that laughing or joking, tender or tough. He meant the same things when he spoke. He was coming from the same place, and he had enormous clarity. It was really unlike anybody else, except maybe a Shakespearean character. He was really able to speak for himself, of himself, as an integrated person.
Now, when you read his works and you do that, what's your personal favorite? And can you talk a little bit about the Gettysburg Address?
The Gettysburg Address is a wonderful challenge for an actor because it's very artfully constructed, as people have said over and over again. But there are rhythms in it and plays and on the use of the word here that endlessly elude you when you read it aloud. So it's this very brief, very dense thing. It's like trying to get all the subtlety out of a sonnet or something. It's like poetry.
Is that your favorite Lincoln speech?
My favorite is the second inaugural, because it's, first of all, really hard to imagine anybody under the circumstances as a war was concluding. It's hard to imagine the victorious leader speaking the way he spoke, that it would even occur to somebody to want to talk about the things that he wanted to talk about is amazing. And then that they were so profound that they were really, that it was really a worldview, a philosophical worldview about why suffering, and that this would be the subject of an inauguration speech. Amazing. And then characteristically beautiful and clear.
One final question. We're glad to have you here. We appreciate that. What's your views? You've been here now 24 hours, Little Rock, Arkansas, Clinton Library.
I think we can say without equivocation that we're absolutely thrilled to be here and completely surprised. I'd never been to Little Rock before. I think this library is beautiful and its location is fabulous beside a river, but also conveniently beside one of the sort of icons of the South, a rusting old bridge across the railroad bridge across the river. It's just beautiful, and this museum is a complete success, I'd say. Although I've only had an hour to look, but I think it's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.